What happens when an 8-year-old walks into a courtroom carrying a tablet and tells the judge, "I brought what he does after dark"? My son, Oliver, had been coached to lie about me for months. But what his father didn't know was that Oliver was recording every single word. This is the story of how my little boy saved us both by doing something no adult thought possible. The courtroom was dead silent. You could hear a pin drop, and there in the middle of it all stood my 8-year-old son Oliver, clutching a tablet in his small hands like it held the secrets of the universe. I'm Emma Collins, and today, my son did something that would change our lives forever. Something I never could have imagined in my wildest dreams. But let me back up. Let me tell you how we got here. 3 months ago, I thought I had my life figured out. I'm a single mom, been raising Oliver on my own since he was 2. I work nights at the emergency room downtown, saving lives while the rest of the world sleeps. It's exhausting, sure, but it pays the bills and gives me something most working parents never get. My days belong completely to my son. Every morning when I come home from my shift, Oliver's already up waiting for me with his messy hair and that crooked smile that melts my heart every single time. We have our routine. I make us breakfast, usually something simple, like scrambled eggs or cereal, and we sit at our little kitchen table talking about everything and nothing. But weekends are pure magic. Saturday mornings are pancake mornings. Oliver stands on his little step stool next to me, flour somehow ending up in his hair, on his nose, everywhere except the bowl. Our golden retriever Toby sits right there with us, tail wagging, hoping for dropped bacon or a stray pancake that might accidentally fall his way. Those Saturday mornings are when Oliver comes alive. He tells me about his dreams from the night before, about the book he's reading, about how Mrs. Ramirez said his drawing of a dinosaur was museum-worthy. His eyes light up when he talks, and I think to myself, this is it. This is what happiness looks like. After breakfast, we might hit the Natural History Museum downtown. Oliver's obsessed with the dinosaur exhibit, especially this massive T-Rex skeleton that towers over everything. He'll stand there for 20 minutes straight, just staring up at it, asking me questions I definitely don't know the answers to. Or we'll spend the afternoon at the park with Toby, watching Oliver chase after him, both of them running like their lives depend on it. I'll sit on the bench with my coffee, watching my son be a kid, thinking I'm the luckiest mom in the world. Sundays are quieter. We'll curl up on the couch together, Oliver's head on my shoulder, reading stories or watching movies. Sometimes he'll fall asleep right there, and I'll just hold him, listening to his breathing, feeling like everything in the world is exactly as it should be. For 6 years, it was just the 3 of us, against the world. Me, Oliver, and Toby. We were a perfect little team, and then David came back. David Hayes, Oliver's biological father, the man who walked out when Oliver was barely old enough to remember him. I'll be honest with you, when David first showed up at our door 3 months ago, I barely recognized him. Gone was the struggling grad student I'd once loved. In his place stood this polished, successful tech executive in a $1,000 suit, driving a car that cost more than I make in 2 years. He looked good, really good. The kind of good that comes with money and success and a life that's gone exactly according to plan. At first, he seemed different, better. He'd gotten his life together, he said. Built a company from the ground up, sold it for millions, and now he wanted to be part of Oliver's life. He wanted to make up for lost time. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him so badly. The first few visits went okay. David would take Oliver out for lunch, to the movies, to fancy restaurants I could never afford. Oliver would come home with stories about the cool car, the big house, the amazing gadgets David had shown him. But here's the thing about being a mom. You notice things, little things. The way your child's smile doesn't quite reach their eyes after these visits. The way they get quiet when you ask about their day. The way they start asking questions that sound way too mature for an 8-year-old. David started talking about the future, about how Oliver deserved better than our little apartment, about private schools and tutors and opportunities I couldn't provide, about how a growing boy needed stability, needed a father figure, needed things I couldn't give him working night shifts at the hospital. And that's when everything started to fall apart. Because David didn't just want to visit Oliver anymore. He wanted custody. Full custody. He wanted to take my son away from me. Let me paint you a picture of what David wanted to take away from me. Picture this. It's Tuesday night, and I've just gotten home from a brutal 12-hour shift. There's been a car accident, 2 heart attacks, and a little girl who came in with a broken arm from falling off her bike. I'm exhausted running on nothing but coffee and determination. But the moment I walk through that door, all of that melts away. Because there's Oliver sitting at our kitchen table with his homework spread out, Toby curled up at his feet. He looks up at me with those bright eyes and says, "Mom, I saved you the last piece of pizza, and I already fed Toby, and guess what? I got an A on my math test." These are the moments David never saw. The quiet moments. The real moments. Our bedtime routine was sacred. Every single night, no matter how tired I was, I'd sit on the edge of Oliver's bed and we'd read together. Sometimes it was Harry Potter, sometimes it was comic books, sometimes it was random stories he'd make up on the spot about superheroes who saved the world with kindness instead of violence. One night, Oliver looked up at me and said, "Mom, do you think Toby dreams about chasing squirrels?" And we spent the next hour making up elaborate dream scenarios for our dog. These weren't Instagram-worthy moments. These were real-life moments, the kind of moments you can't buy with money. Our dinner conversations were legendary. Oliver would tell me about his day at school, about how Tommy shared his cookies at lunch, about how the class hamster had babies, about how he helped a new kid find the library. I'd tell him about my patients, the ones I could talk about anyway, about how I helped people feel better, about how proud I was to be a nurse. Sometimes we'd get creative with dinner. We called it whatever's in the fridge night. Oliver would help me invent these ridiculous recipes. Spaghetti with scrambled eggs and cheese, peanut butter and jelly quesadillas, toast with tomato sauce, and pepperoni that we pretended was pizza. Looking back, some of those meals were probably terrible, but Oliver thought I was the greatest chef in the world. That's what real childhood looks like. It's not fancy restaurants or expensive toys. It's feeling safe, feeling loved, feeling like you matter to someone who would move mountains for you. But David saw things differently. The first few weeks after his return, he was charming. Almost too charming. He'd show up with expensive gifts for Oliver. Video games I couldn't afford. Clothes with designer labels. Toys that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. "Oliver deserves the best," he'd say, handing over some elaborate gadget. "He's such a smart kid. He could really thrive with the right opportunities." At first, I thought he was just trying to make up for lost time, trying to buy his way back into Oliver's heart. I felt sorry for him, honestly. I thought maybe he genuinely wanted to be a better father. But then, the suggestion started. "You know, Emma, there's this amazing private school just 15 minutes from my house. Small class sizes, individualized attention college prep starting in elementary school. Oliver's so bright, he could really flourish there. My neighborhood is so safe, Emma. Great parks, top-rated schools, the kind of place where kids can ride their bikes without parents worrying. Oliver could have his own room, his own bathroom, a backyard to play in. I've been thinking with your work schedule, it must be so hard to give Oliver the attention he needs. Night shifts are tough on families. Maybe it would be better if he stayed with me more often. You could visit whenever you want, of course." Each suggestion felt like a punch to the gut, because underneath all the polite words and reasonable-sounding arguments, I heard what he was really saying. "You're not enough. Your life isn't enough. I can give him more." But the worst part, I started to wonder if maybe he was right. Maybe Oliver did deserve a big house with a backyard. Maybe he did deserve private school and tutors and all the advantages money could buy. Maybe I was being selfish holding him back, keeping him in our little apartment because I couldn't bear to let him go. The doubt crept in slowly, like poison in my veins. David started scheduling his visits for times when I was at work. He'd pick Oliver up from school, bring him back after bedtime, always with stories about some amazing adventure they'd had. Go-kart racing, fancy steakhouses, shopping sprees at toy stores. Oliver would come home exhausted, overstimulated, and strangely quiet. When I'd ask about his day, he'd give me these one-word answers that weren't like him at all. "How was dinner, buddy?" "Fine." "Did you have fun go-kart racing?" "Yeah." "Tell me about it." "It was good." This from the kid who used to give me detailed play-by-play accounts of his entire day, complete with sound effects and dramatic reenactments. Then came the lawyer. I'll never forget the day that certified letter arrived. I was getting ready for work, Oliver was eating cereal and watching cartoons, and Toby was begging for bacon scraps. Just a normal Thursday morning in our normal life. The letter was thick, official-looking, with a law firm's letterhead that screamed expensive. My hands were shaking as I opened it. "Petition for custody modification." The words swam in front of my eyes. David wasn't just suggesting anymore. He was taking action. According to his lawyer, Emma Collins was an unfit mother. Working night shifts meant Oliver was unsupervised for dangerous periods of time. The apartment was too small, the neighborhood too rough, the schools substandard. Oliver needed stability structure and financial security that his mother simply couldn't provide. They painted a picture of me that I barely recognized, a neglectful mother who prioritized work over her child, a woman who couldn't provide basic necessities, let alone opportunities for growth and development. They made my night shifts sound like abandonment, our cozy apartment sound like a slum, our close bond sound like dependency. Reading that letter felt like watching someone take a wrecking ball to everything I'd built, everything I'd sacrificed for everything I thought I was good at. But the most devastating part, some of their arguments weren't entirely wrong. I did work nights. Oliver was alone sometimes, though never unsupervised. I did live paycheck to paycheck. I couldn't afford private school or tutors or family vacations to Europe. What they didn't mention was that Oliver had never missed a meal, never lacked for love, never doubted for a single second that he was the most important thing in my world. What they didn't mention was that I'd turned down promotions and better paying day positions because I wanted to be available for Oliver during the day, that I'd chosen night shifts specifically so I could be the one to help with homework, attend school events, and tuck him into bed every single night. What they didn't mention was that every decision I'd made for 6 years had been about what was best for my son. But in a courtroom, love doesn't always win against money. That night, after Oliver was asleep, I sat at our kitchen table reading and rereading that letter until my eyes burned. Toby came over and put his head on my lap, like he could sense that our little world was about to change forever. I had 30 days to respond, 30 days to prove that I was a good mother, 30 days to fight for my son. I had no idea that Oliver was about to fight for himself. The changes started small, so small that at first I thought I was imagining them. Oliver stopped talking as much during our morning breakfast routine. Instead of chattering about his dreams or his plans for the day, he'd sit quietly pushing his eggs around his plate, staring out the window like he was somewhere else entirely. Our bedtime stories became shorter. He'd curl up next to me, but instead of asking questions or making up silly voices for the characters, he'd just listen silently, his body tense against mine. The Saturday morning pancake tradition that had been our sacred ritual for years suddenly felt forced. Oliver would still help me mix the batter, but the joy was gone. No more flour fights, no more giggling when Toby tried to steal bacon off the counter. Just quiet compliance like he was going through the motions because he thought it was what I wanted. I told myself it was normal. Kids go through phases, right? Maybe he was just growing up, becoming more serious, more mature. Maybe I was being paranoid because of the custody battle. But then came the night I found him crying in his room. It was about 2 weeks after David's lawyer had filed their petition. I'd just gotten home from work and I was doing my usual routine, checking on Oliver, giving him a kiss, whispering that I was home safe. But instead of finding him peacefully asleep, I found him sitting up in bed, tears streaming down his face. "Buddy, what's wrong?" I whispered, sitting down beside him. He wiped his eyes quickly like he was embarrassed to be caught crying. "Nothing, Mom, just a bad dream." But when I pulled back his covers to tuck him in, I felt something damp. The sheets were wet. Oliver hadn't wet the bed since he was 4 years old. "It's okay, sweetheart," I said, trying to keep my voice calm even though alarm bells were screaming in my head. "Accidents happen. Let's just change the sheets." He was mortified. Absolutely mortified. This confident, outgoing kid who usually bounced back from everything was now ashamed of something that wasn't even his fault. "Please don't tell Dad," he whispered as I helped him into clean pajamas. "Please, Mom. He'll think I'm a baby." The way he said it, the fear in his voice, it made my stomach drop. Since when did Oliver worry about what David thought? Since when did he call him Dad instead of David? The bedwetting happened 3 more times that week. Then came the bruise. It was a Saturday morning, and we were getting ready for our usual pancake breakfast. Oliver was in his pajamas, reaching up to get the syrup from the cabinet when his shirt rode up and I saw it. A dark purple bruise on his leg right above his knee. It was perfectly round, like a thumbprint. "Oliver, what happened to your leg?" He looked down, then quickly pulled his shirt down to cover it. "I fell off my bike at Dad's house. It's no big deal," but something about the way he said it didn't sit right with me. Oliver had fallen off his bike plenty of times before. He usually wore his injuries like badges of honor, telling me elaborate stories about his crashes and close calls. This time he seemed almost rehearsed. I made a mental note to ask David about it, but Oliver must have sensed what I was thinking because he grabbed my hand. "Mom, you don't need to call him. It really was just an accident. I was being careless." Being careless. Those weren't Oliver's words. Oliver would have said, "I was being dumb," or "I crashed into a tree," or something distinctly 8-year-old. Being careless sounded like something an adult had told him to say. The phone call from Mrs. Ramirez came on a Tuesday. Mrs. Ramirez had been Oliver's second-grade teacher, and she was one of those educators who genuinely cared about her students. She taught Oliver the year before, and even though he'd moved on to 3rd grade, she still kept an eye on him in the hallways and at lunch. "Emma, I hope you don't mind me calling," she said, and I could hear the concern in her voice immediately. "I wanted to talk to you about Oliver. I've been noticing some changes in him lately, and I'm a little worried." My heart started racing. What kind of changes? Well, he's become very quiet. He used to be one of our most enthusiastic students, always raising his hand, always eager to share stories about his weekend. But lately, he barely speaks unless directly asked a question. I was gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles were white. "Anything else? His artwork has changed dramatically. You know how Oliver used to draw such bright, happy pictures. Dinosaurs and rockets and family portraits with big smiles. Well, his recent drawings have been concerning. Dark colors, sad faces, lots of storms and rain. Yesterday, he drew a picture of a little boy standing alone in what looked like a prison cell. A prison cell. My 8-year-old son had drawn himself in a prison cell. Mrs. Ramirez he said anything at all that might explain what's going on. There was a long pause. "Emma, I don't want to overstep, but yesterday during lunch I heard him talking to another student. The child was complaining about having to go to his dad's house for the weekend, and Oliver said something that really stuck with me. He said, 'At least your dad doesn't make you practice lying.'" The words hit me like a physical blow. Practice lying. What was David making Oliver practice lying about? "I think you should talk to him," Mrs. Ramirez continued gently. "And, Emma, if you need any support, any documentation of behavioral changes, please don't hesitate to reach out. Oliver is a special kid and we all want what's best for him. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, staring at nothing. Toby came over and put his head on my lap, sensing that something was wrong. I scratched behind his ears and tried to process what I'd just learned. My son was practicing lying. My son was drawing prison cells. My son was afraid to tell me about bruises. This wasn't just about a custody battle anymore. This was about my child's safety and well-being. That evening, when Oliver came home from school, I tried to talk to him. Really talk to him. "Hey, buddy, how was school today?" "Fine. Mrs. Ramirez says hi. She mentioned you've been pretty quiet lately. Everything okay?" He shrugged, not meeting my eyes. "I guess." "Oliver, you know you can tell me anything, right? Anything at all. I'm always on your side." For a moment, just a moment, his face crumpled and I thought he was going to open up. But then he straightened up, like he'd remembered something, and shook his head. "Everything's fine, Mom. I'm just tired." But everything wasn't fine. I could see it in the way he flinched when I touched his shoulder. I could see it in the way he checked his words before speaking, like he was afraid of saying the wrong thing. I could see it in the way he'd started sleeping with his bedroom door open, like he needed to make sure he could hear everything happening in the house. My baby was scared, and I didn't know how to help him. That's when Claire stepped in. Claire Martinez lived in the apartment next door, and she'd been our neighbor for about 3 years. She was in her 60s, a retired teacher with grown children of her own, and she'd always had a soft spot for Oliver. Sometimes she'd babysit when I had to work late, and Oliver adored her. She made the best chocolate chip cookies in the building, and she had an endless supply of board games and patience. Claire knocked on my door that Thursday evening right after Oliver had gone to bed. "Emma, honey, I need to talk to you," she said, and her expression was serious. "I've been hearing things through the walls and I'm concerned." My heart sank. What kind of things? Oliver crying at night, and not just normal kid crying, deep heartbreaking sobs that go on for hours. It's been happening almost every night for the past 2 weeks. I felt like the worst mother in the world. How had I not known my son was crying himself to sleep every night? "There's more," Claire continued gently. "Last week I heard you talking to someone on the phone. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but your voice was raised and I gathered it was about a custody situation." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. "Emma, I've been a teacher for 35 years. I've seen a lot of kids go through a lot of difficult situations, and I'm telling you right now something is very wrong with that little boy. Whatever's happening during his visits with his father, it's traumatizing him." The tears I'd been holding back for weeks finally spilled over. "I don't know what to do, Claire. I can't prove anything. David's lawyers are making me look like a terrible mother, and Oliver won't tell me what's really happening." Claire reached over and squeezed my hand. "Here's what we're going to do. First, you're going to document everything. Every behavioral change, every bruise, every night he wets the bed. Second, I'm going to help you." "Claire, I can't ask you to." "You're not asking. I'm offering." "Emma, I don't have to work nights anymore. I can stay with Oliver when you're at the hospital. He trusts me, and maybe in time he'll feel safe enough to tell me what's really going on." For the first time in weeks, I felt a tiny spark of hope. I wasn't alone in this. Someone else could see what I was seeing. Someone else believed that my son was in trouble. "Thank you," I whispered. "Thank you so much." Claire patted my hand. "We're going to figure this out, honey. Children have a way of revealing the truth when they feel safe enough to do so. We just need to give Oliver that safety." Little did I know, Oliver was already planning to reveal the truth in a way none of us could have imagined. He was going to record it himself. The breakthrough came on a rainy Sunday afternoon 3 weeks after Claire had started helping us. I was folding laundry in the living room while Oliver played quietly with his Legos on the floor. Claire was in the kitchen, making her famous chocolate chip cookies, and the whole apartment smelled like warmth and safety. For the first time in months, things felt almost normal. Then Oliver looked up at me with those big, serious eyes and said something that stopped my heart. Daddy tells me to say that mommy doesn't care about me. I dropped the shirt I was folding. What did you just say, buddy? Oliver's bottom lip started trembling. He practices with me. He says, when the judge asks you questions, you need to tell them that your mom works all the time and doesn't pay attention to you. And when I said that wasn't true, he got really mad. The room went silent except for the sound of rain against the windows. Even Claire had stopped moving in the kitchen. Oliver, I said, kneeling down next to him, has Daddy been telling you to lie about our life together? He nodded, tears starting to spill down his cheeks. He makes me practice saying that I'm scared to be alone at night when you work. But I'm not scared, Mom. Mrs. Chen next door checks on me and I have Toby and I know you always come home. Mrs. Chen. He meant Claire, but in his 8-year-old mind, he was getting confused about names, probably because David had been drilling so many stories into his head. What else does Daddy make you practice saying? That our apartment is dirty, and that I don't have enough food, and that you yell at me. His voice was getting smaller with each word. But none of that's true, Mom. You never yell at me unless I do something really dangerous, and even then you're not mean about it. Claire appeared in the doorway, flour on her hands, her face pale with anger and sadness. He also tells me that if I don't say these things, the judge will make me live with strangers, and I'll never see you again. Oliver was sobbing now. I don't want to live with strangers, Mom. I want to stay here with you and Toby, and our pancake mornings, and our bedtime stories. I pulled him into my arms, holding him tight while he cried. Over his head, I made eye contact with Claire, and I could see that she was thinking the same thing I was. This was child abuse. Emotional manipulation of the worst kind. Buddy, listen to me, I said, pulling back so I could look at his face. You never ever have to lie for anyone. Not for Daddy, not for me, not for anyone. The truth is always the right answer, even when it's scary to tell it. But what if the judge believes Daddy instead of me? Then we'll figure it out together. But Oliver, I need you to promise me something. If Daddy ever asks you to practice lying again, I need you to tell me or tell Claire. Can you do that? He nodded, wiping his nose on his sleeve. That night, after Oliver was asleep, Claire and I sat at my kitchen table with cups of coffee that had long gone cold, trying to figure out what to do with this information. We need evidence, Claire said. Oliver's word against David's isn't going to be enough, especially with David's expensive lawyers. But how do we get evidence? It's not like David's going to confess to manipulating Oliver in front of witnesses. Claire was quiet for a long moment. Then she looked up at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Emma, what if Oliver could record one of these coaching sessions? What do you mean? I mean, what if the next time Oliver goes to David's house, he takes something with him that could capture what really happens there? I shook my head immediately. Claire, I can't ask my 8-year-old son to spy on his father. That's way too much responsibility to put on a child. What if he wanted to do it? What if it was his idea? Before I could respond, we heard a small voice from the hallway. I want to do it. Oliver was standing in the doorway in his pajamas, his hair sticking up from sleep. How long had he been listening? Buddy, you should be in bed, I said, getting up to walk him back to his room. Mom, wait, I heard what Mrs. Claire said. And I want to do it. I want to record Daddy so the judge can hear what he really says to me. I knelt down in front of him. Oliver, that's a very grown-up decision, and it might be scary. Are you sure? He nodded solemnly. I'm tired of being scared all the time, and I'm tired of Daddy telling me to say mean things about you when they're not true. If I record him, then everyone will know that I love living here with you. 2 days later, Claire helped Oliver set up a plan that was both brilliant and heartbreaking in its simplicity. Oliver had an old tablet that I'd bought him for educational games. Claire showed him how to open the voice recording app and hide the tablet in his backpack. The plan was for him to start recording whenever David began one of his coaching sessions. Just press this button, Claire explained, and then put the tablet back in your bag. It'll keep recording even when the screen is off. What if Daddy finds it? Oliver asked. Then you tell him it's for school. You're doing a project about sounds or something. But try to keep it hidden if you can. I felt sick to my stomach about the whole thing. What kind of mother lets her 8-year-old child gather evidence against his own father? But what choice did I have? Oliver was being psychologically damaged and I needed proof. The first recording Oliver brought back was almost inaudible. Lots of rustling sounds, muffled voices, and long stretches of silence. But there were a few clear moments that made my blood run cold. David's voice sharp and impatient. Oliver, we've practiced this 100 times. When the judge asks you if you feel safe at your mother's house, what do you say? Oliver's small voice uncertain. That sometimes I get scared because Mom's not there. No, that's not right. You say that you're scared because your mother leaves you alone all night in a dangerous neighborhood. Say it again. Dad, but I'm not really scared. Mrs. Clare checks on me and, Oliver, stop arguing with me. This is important. If you don't say the right things, they're going to send you to live with people you don't know. Do you want that? No. Then say it right. Your mother leaves you alone in a dangerous neighborhood and you're scared. Say it. There was a long pause and then Oliver's voice so small and defeated. My mother leaves me alone in a dangerous neighborhood and I'm scared. Good. Now, when they ask you about food, what do you say? I had to turn off the recording. I couldn't listen to any more without throwing up. The second recording was clearer and it was worse. David was coaching Oliver on how to cry on command, how to look sad when talking about me, how to make the judge feel sorry for him. Remember, Oliver, your mother doesn't really care about you. She cares more about her job than she does about her own son. Can you look sad when you say that? But that's not true, Dad. Mom loves me more than anything. Oliver, you're not listening. It doesn't matter what's true. What matters is what the judge believes. And if you want to keep living in my nice house with your own room and all the toys you want, then you need to make the judge believe that your mother is a bad parent. The manipulation was so blatant, so cruel, that I couldn't believe any adult could do this to a child, let alone their own child. But the third recording was the one that changed everything. It was from a night when David thought Oliver was asleep. Oliver had left the tablet running in his bag, which was sitting in the hallway outside the guest room where he stayed during visits. David was on the phone with someone and his voice carried clearly through the thin walls. Yeah, the kid's almost ready. I've been working on him for weeks. By the time we get to court, he'll tell them exactly what they need to hear about his mother. A pause, presumably, while the other person spoke. Of course he believes it's true. Kids that age, they'll believe anything if you repeat it enough times. The key is making them think that if they don't cooperate, something terrible will happen to them. Another pause. Emma, she has no idea what's coming. By the time I'm done, she'll be lucky to get supervised visitation. The kid will be living with me full-time and she'll be paying me child support. It's perfect. Laughter. Actual laughter about destroying a child's relationship with his mother. The best part is Oliver actually thinks he's protecting her by going along with it. I told him that if he doesn't say what I want him to say, they'll take him away from both of us and put him in foster care. Kids are so easy to manipulate when they're scared. When I finished listening to that recording, I was shaking so hard I could barely hold the tablet. This wasn't just about custody anymore. This was about a man who was willing to psychologically abuse his own child to get what he wanted. I called the lawyer my friend had recommended, a young woman named Ava Chen who specialized in family law. When I told her about the recordings, there was a long silence on the other end of the phone. Emma, these recordings are incredibly damaging to David's case. But I have to ask, how did you obtain them? Oliver recorded them himself. He was tired of being coached to lie about me. Another pause. That complicates things. The legality of recordings made by a minor without the other parent's consent is a gray area. Some judges will allow it, especially in cases involving child welfare. Others won't. My heart sank. So, they might not be admissible. It depends on the judge. But Emma, even if they're not admissible as evidence, they give us invaluable insight into David's tactics. We can prepare Oliver for the kinds of questions David's lawyer might ask, and we can coach him, legally coach him, to tell the truth, despite what his father has been telling him. I don't want to coach him at all, I just want him to be honest. And that's exactly what we'll do. We'll prepare him to tell his truth, his real experiences in his own words. The difference is we'll be encouraging honesty while David has been encouraging deception. Ava paused, and I could hear papers rustling in the background. Emma, I have to tell you something. I've been practicing family law for 8 years, and I've seen a lot of manipulation tactics. But this level of psychological abuse against a child is extreme. David isn't just trying to win custody. He's willing to damage his own son's mental health to do it. So what do? We fight. We use every legal tool available to us, and we make sure that judge understands exactly what kind of man David Hayes really is. What about Oliver? What if David finds out about the recordings? What if he gets angry? We'll request supervised visitation immediately. Given the evidence of emotional manipulation, I think we have a strong case for having David's visits monitored until the custody hearing. For the first time in months, I felt like maybe we had a chance. But I had no idea that Oliver was already planning the most powerful piece of evidence of all. He was going to speak for himself. The day of the final custody hearing arrived like a storm I'd been watching approach for months. I barely slept the night before. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Oliver's face in that courtroom, having to choose between the truth and the lies his father had drilled into him. I kept thinking about all the ways this could go wrong, all the ways I could lose my son forever. Claire came over early that morning to help me get ready. She made coffee and toast that I couldn't eat, and she sat with Oliver while he had breakfast, keeping him calm and distracted. "Remember," she whispered to me as I was putting on my one good suit, "you're fighting for the truth, and the truth has a way of winning even when everything seems impossible." Oliver was unusually quiet that morning. He'd insisted on wearing his best clothes, a button-down shirt and khakis that were slightly too big for him. He looked so grown up, so serious, clutching his little backpack like it contained the most important thing in the world, which, as it turned out, it did. The courthouse was intimidating in a way I hadn't expected. Marble floors, high ceilings, the kind of formal atmosphere that makes you feel small and insignificant. David was already there with his team of lawyers, looking confident and expensive in his perfectly tailored suit. When he saw Oliver, he walked over with that charming smile he'd perfected. "Hey buddy, you ready for today? Remember what we practiced?" Oliver nodded, but I noticed his hands were shaking slightly. I wanted to grab him and run to protect him from whatever was about to happen. The courtroom itself was smaller than I'd imagined, but somehow that made it feel more intense, more personal. Judge Patricia Morrison was a woman in her 50s, with kind but sharp eyes that seemed to see everything. She'd been presiding over family court for over 20 years, according to Ava, and she had a reputation for putting children's welfare above everything else. David's lawyer, a man named Richard Blackstone, who probably charged more per hour than I made in a month, went first. He painted a picture of David that was almost unrecognizable, a devoted father who'd gotten his life together and could provide opportunities that I simply couldn't match. "Your Honor, Mr. Hayes has demonstrated his commitment to his son's welfare through concrete actions. He's prepared to provide private education at one of the state's most prestigious schools. He's offering a safe upscale neighborhood with excellent recreational facilities. He has the financial resources to ensure Oliver never wants for anything." Blackstone walked around the courtroom like he owned it, gesturing dramatically as he spoke. "Compare this to the current living situation. Ms. Collins works night shifts, leaving an 8-year-old child alone for hours at a time in a neighborhood with documented safety concerns. The apartment is cramped, the local school district is underfunded, and the child is essentially raising himself while his mother prioritizes her career over his needs." Every word felt like a knife. He was taking my sacrifices, my efforts to provide for Oliver, and twisting them into evidence of neglect. "Furthermore, Your Honor, we have concerns about Ms. Collins' emotional stability. The stress of single parenthood combined with a demanding work schedule has clearly taken its toll. Oliver has confided in his father about feeling unsafe and uncared for. I felt Ava's hand on my arm holding me back from jumping up and screaming that it was all lies. Then it was our turn. Ava stood up, and I could see why she'd become a lawyer so young. There was a fire in her eyes, a determination that matched my own. Your Honor, this case isn't about money or fancy schools or big houses. This case is about a child's right to live with the parent who actually loves and protects him. She pulled out a folder of documents, the evidence we'd gathered over the past few weeks. The defense would have you believe that working night shifts makes Ms. Collins an unfit mother. But the reality is that Ms. Collins specifically chose night shifts so she could be available for her son during the day. She attends every school event, every parent-teacher conference, every doctor's appointment. She's never missed a single important moment in Oliver's life. Ava's voice grew stronger as she continued. Mr. Hayes, on the other hand, abandoned his son when Oliver was 2 years old. He had no contact for 6 years. No birthday cards, no Christmas presents, no phone calls. He only reappeared when it became convenient for him. She turned to look directly at David. And since his return, Oliver has exhibited signs of severe emotional distress, bedwetting nightmares, withdrawal from activities he once enjoyed. These symptoms appeared only after Mr. Hayes began seeking custody. But the most powerful moment came when Ava called me to testify. Ms. Collins, can you tell the court what stability means to you? I looked at Oliver sitting in the front row with Claire, and I found my voice. Your Honor, Mr. Hayes' lawyer talks about stability like it's something you can buy. But stability isn't about having the biggest house or the most expensive toys. Stability means knowing that when you wake up scared in the middle of the night, someone who loves you will be there to comfort you. Stability means having pancake breakfast on Saturday mornings and bedtime stories every single night. Stability means feeling safe and loved and valued for exactly who you are. My voice cracked slightly, but I pushed through. For 6 years, I've been Oliver's stability. I've been his constant, his safe harbor, his biggest cheerleader. I'm not perfect, and I can't give him everything money can buy. But I can give him something much more valuable, unconditional love and genuine security. I saw tears in Judge Morrison's eyes, and I dared to hope that maybe, just maybe she understood. But then David took the stand, and he was good. Really good. He talked about his mistakes, his regrets, his desire to make up for lost time. He painted himself as a reformed man who'd learned from his errors and was ready to be the father Oliver deserved. Your Honor, I know I wasn't there for the first part of Oliver's life, and I'll regret that forever. But I'm here now, and I can provide opportunities that will set him up for success. Private tutoring, travel exposure to experiences that will broaden his horizons. He even managed to shed a few tears when he talked about how much he'd missed Oliver, how much he wanted to be part of his daily life. If I hadn't known the truth, I might have believed him myself. Then came the moment I'd been dreading. Judge Morrison called Oliver to the front of the courtroom. Oliver, I need to ask you a few questions. Is that okay? Oliver nodded, walking slowly to the witness area. He looked so small in that big chair, but there was something in his posture, a determination I recognized. Oliver, can you tell me about your life with your mom? Oliver's voice was quiet but clear. My mom takes really good care of me. She makes me breakfast every morning before school, and she helps me with my homework, and we read stories together every night. Do you feel safe living with your mom? Yes. She always makes sure I'm okay, and when she has to work at night, Mrs. Claire stays with me, and I have Toby, and I know Mom will always come home. Judge Morrison smiled gently. And what about your visits with your dad? Oliver hesitated, and I could see the internal struggle playing out on his face. David leaned forward in his seat, and I knew he was silently reminding Oliver of all those practiced lies. But then, Oliver did something that no one, not me, not Ava, not even Claire, had expected. He stood up. Your Honor, he said, his voice stronger now. I brought something I want you to see. He reached into his backpack and pulled out his tablet. I brought what he does after dark. The courtroom went completely silent. David's face went pale. Oliver, Judge Morrison said gently, what do you mean? My dad has been telling me to lie about my mom. He makes me practice saying things that aren't true. He told me that if I didn't say these things, they would take me away from both of them, and I'd have to live with strangers. Oliver's hands were shaking as he held the tablet, but his voice was steady. I recorded him. I recorded him telling me to lie, and I recorded him talking on the phone about how he was going to trick everyone. The explosion of voices in the courtroom was immediate. David's lawyer was on his feet, objecting to everything. David himself looked like he'd seen a ghost, but Judge Morrison raised her hand and everyone fell silent. Oliver, did anyone ask you to make these recordings? No, Your Honor. I did it myself because I was tired of being scared and tired of him making me say mean things about my mom when they weren't true. And why are you sharing them now? Oliver looked directly at his father, and there was no fear in his eyes anymore. Because I want to live with my mom. I love my mom, and I don't want to lie anymore. Judge Morrison looked at the tablet for a long moment. I'm going to need to review these recordings in my chambers. Court will recess for 2 hours. Those 2 hours were the longest of my life. Claire, Ava. Oliver and I sat in a small waiting room down the hall from the courtroom. Oliver curled up next to me on the uncomfortable plastic chairs, and for the first time in months, he seemed truly relaxed. Are you okay, buddy? I whispered. He nodded against my shoulder. I'm glad I told the truth, Mom. I was so tired of pretending. When we were called back into the courtroom, Judge Morrison's expression was grim. She looked directly at David as she spoke. I have reviewed the recordings provided by Oliver Collins. What I heard was deeply disturbing. David shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Mr. Hayes, you systematically manipulated your 8-year-old son into believing that he needed to lie about his mother in order to avoid being taken away from both parents. You coached him to make false statements about neglect and abuse that never occurred. You deliberately caused psychological harm to a child in order to win a custody battle. Her voice grew harder with each word. Furthermore, your phone conversation with an unidentified third party revealed that this manipulation was premeditated and ongoing. You laughed about traumatizing your own son. You treated this custody case like a game to be won rather than a decision that would profoundly impact a child's life. David's lawyer tried to interrupt, but Judge Morrison held up her hand. I've seen a lot of things in my 23 years on this bench, Mr. Hayes. But I have never seen a parent willing to psychologically abuse their own child for personal gain. She turned to look at Oliver and her expression softened. Oliver, what you did today took incredible courage. You chose to tell the truth, even when it was scary, and that's something most adults struggle to do. Then she delivered her ruling. Sole physical and legal custody is awarded to Emma Collins. Mr. Hayes will be permitted supervised visitation for 2 hours every other weekend contingent upon completing a parenting course and undergoing psychological evaluation and counseling. The relief that flooded through me was so intense I thought I might pass out. Oliver grabbed my hand and squeezed it tight. But Judge Morrison wasn't finished. Mr. Hayes, I'm also ordering that you participate in therapy specifically addressing the psychological manipulation of children. Your visitation rights will be reviewed in 6 months, and any attempt to manipulate Oliver or interfere with his relationship with his mother will result in the immediate termination of those rights. She looked back at Oliver one more time. Young man, I want you to know that you will never be forced to visit your father if you don't want to. This court recognizes that you are old enough to have a voice in decisions that affect your life. Oliver nodded solemnly. Thank you, Your Honor. As we left the courtroom, David tried one last time to approach Oliver. Son, you don't understand what you've done. You're going to miss out on so many opportunities. But Oliver looked up at him with those clear, honest eyes and said something that stopped David cold. I understand that you wanted me to lie about my mom, and lying is wrong. I don't want to visit you anymore. And just like that, it was over. The man who had tried to buy my son, manipulate my son, and steal my son walked away alone. Oliver and I walked out of that courthouse together, hand in hand, ready to go home to our little apartment and our pancake mornings and our bedtime stories. Ready to go back to being the family we'd always been, small but mighty humble, but happy and filled with the kind of love that no amount of money could ever buy. 6 months later, I'm standing in our little kitchen, watching Oliver flip pancakes like he's been doing it his whole life. And I can barely remember what it felt like to be afraid of losing him. The change in Oliver was almost immediate after the court hearing. That very first Saturday morning back home, he woke me up at 7 a.m. with a huge grin on his face. Mom, can we make extra pancakes today? I want to invite Mrs. Claire over for breakfast. The relief in his voice, the pure joy in his eyes. It was like watching a flower bloom after a long, harsh winter. Our pancake mornings became legendary again. Oliver would stand on his little step-stool flower, somehow managing to get in his hair on Toby's nose, and probably on the ceiling. But this time, the laughter was real. The smiles were genuine. There was no shadow hanging over us anymore. Claire became such a regular part of our Saturday routine that Oliver started setting 3 places at the table automatically. She'd bring her famous chocolate chip cookie batter, and we'd have this incredible breakfast feast that lasted for hours. One morning, about a month after the hearing, Oliver looked up from his pancakes and said, Mom, I forgot what it felt like to not have a stomachache all the time. That's when I realized just how much stress that little boy had been carrying. The bedwetting stopped completely within 2 weeks. The nightmares disappeared. His teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, called me to say that Oliver was back to his old self, raising his hand enthusiastically, telling elaborate stories during show and tell, drawing pictures full of bright colors and happy faces. Speaking of his artwork, the transformation was remarkable. Gone were the dark, stormy drawings of lonely children. Instead, our refrigerator was covered with pictures of dinosaurs wearing party hats, rocket ships flying to rainbow planets, and family portraits where everyone had huge, ridiculous smiles. One drawing in particular made me cry happy tears. It showed our little apartment, but in Oliver's 8-year-old artistic vision, it looked like a castle. There was me in my scrubs with a crown on my head, Oliver with a cape flying behind him, and Toby with wings like a superhero dog. At the bottom, in his careful handwriting, he'd written, Home Sweet Home, population perfect. David attended exactly 3 supervised visits before he stopped showing up altogether. The court-appointed supervisor told Ava that David seemed uncomfortable and frustrated during the visits. He couldn't control the narrative anymore, couldn't coach Oliver or manipulate the situation. When faced with simply spending time with his son, playing games, talking about school, being a real parent, David apparently had no idea what to do. After the 3rd missed visit, we received a letter from David's lawyer. He was relocating to Seattle for a new business opportunity and would no longer be pursuing visitation rights. Oliver's reaction when I told him was telling. He just nodded and said, Okay, Mom, can we go to the park now? No tears, no questions about why his father was leaving again. Just acceptance and a desire to move on with his life. Sometimes children are wiser than we give them credit for. But the most amazing thing that came out of our ordeal wasn't just getting our life back. It was the difference Oliver's courage made for other families going through similar situations. Judge Morrison was so moved by Oliver's case that she worked with the state legislature to implement what became known as the Oliver Directive, a new protocol for family courts that specifically addressed how to handle evidence gathered by children themselves in custody cases. The directive established guidelines for when recordings made by minors could be considered as evidence, particularly in cases involving psychological manipulation or emotional abuse. It also mandated special training for judges and court personnel on how to interview children who may have been coached or manipulated by a parent. Ava called me 6 months after our hearing to tell me that the Oliver Directive had already been used in 12 other cases across the state, helping other children escape from manipulative situations. Your son didn't just save himself, she said. He's helping save other kids too. When I told Oliver about this, his response was typically thoughtful. Does that mean other kids won't have to be scared like I was? That's exactly what it means, buddy. He considered this for a moment, then said, Good. Being scared is the worst feeling in the world. The experience also changed the direction of my own life in ways I never expected. About 4 months after the hearing, I was contacted by the Family Support Center downtown. They'd heard about our case and wanted to know if I'd be interested in volunteering with families going through custody battles, particularly cases involving parental manipulation. At first, I wasn't sure I was ready to relive that trauma even to help others. But Oliver, in his infinite 8-year-old wisdom, convinced me. Mom, you helped me be brave. Maybe you can help other kids be brave too. So I started volunteering 2 afternoons a week, working with mothers and children who were facing situations similar to ours. I shared our story, offered practical advice about documenting concerning behaviors, and mostly just listened when people needed someone to understand what they were going through. Oliver often came with me to the center. While I met with families, he would sit in the children's area drawing pictures and quietly befriending kids who were scared and confused about their own family situations. The staff at the center were amazed by Oliver's natural ability to connect with children who were going through trauma. He never talked about his own experience, unless a child specifically asked, but somehow his presence alone seemed to give other kids permission to feel safe. One afternoon, I found him sitting with a little girl who couldn't have been more than 5 years old. She was clutching a torn stuffed animal and hadn't spoken to any of the adults all day. Oliver had given her some of his crayons, and they were coloring together in companionable silence. When her mother came to pick her up, the little girl whispered something to Oliver that made him smile. What did she say? I asked him later. She said I made her feel like everything might be okay. That's when I knew we'd truly healed from our ordeal. When Oliver could take his pain and transform it into comfort for someone else. The center director, Mrs. Patterson, was so impressed with Oliver's natural empathy that she asked if he'd be willing to have his artwork displayed in the main hallway. Now, when families walk into the Family Support Center, the first thing they see are Oliver's bright, hopeful drawings covering the walls. There's a picture of children holding hands under a rainbow with the words, "You're not alone," written in his careful 8-year-old handwriting. There's a drawing of a family of 3, a mom, a kid, and a dog, sitting around a breakfast table with enormous pancakes and the caption, "Love looks like this." But my favorite is the one he drew after we'd been volunteering for about 3 months. It shows a courthouse, but instead of looking scary and intimidating, Oliver had drawn it with flowers growing around it and a big sun shining overhead. At the bottom, he'd written, "Where Truth Lives." Every family who comes to the center sees that drawing, and Mrs. Patterson told me that several children have pointed to it and asked their parents if that's really what a courthouse looks like. I tell them, she said, that when you tell the truth, that's exactly what it looks like. Life settled into a new rhythm that felt both familiar and completely different. Our Saturday pancake mornings continued, but now they were celebrations rather than refugees. Oliver started inviting friends over sometimes, and our little kitchen would be filled with the chaos and joy of children being children. He joined the school art club and the junior debate team activities he'd never shown interest in before. His confidence grew every day, and watching him discover who he was when he wasn't afraid became one of the greatest joys of my life. Our bedtime routine evolved too. Instead of just reading stories, Oliver started making up his own tales about brave children who stood up to bullies and told the truth, even when it was scary. Sometimes I wondered if he was processing his own experience through these stories, but mostly, I was just proud of the thoughtful, courageous person he was becoming. Claire remained a constant presence in our lives, and Oliver started calling her Grandma Claire, which made her cry happy tears every single time. She taught him how to bake her famous chocolate chip cookies, and now our apartment always smells like vanilla and chocolate and home. One evening, about 8 months after the hearing, I was getting ready for work when Oliver came into my room with something in his hands. "Mom, I want to give this back to you." It was the tablet he'd used to record David. He'd kept it in his room for months like a security blanket, but now he was ready to let it go. "Are you sure, buddy?" He nodded. "I don't need it anymore. The scared part of me is gone." We decided together to donate the tablet to the Family Support Center, where other children could use it for schoolwork and games, transforming an instrument of survival into a tool for learning and creativity. Just last week, Oliver won first place in the school district's art competition with a painting called My Family. It showed the three of us, me, Oliver, and Toby. But instead of our little apartment, we were standing in front of something that looked like a combination of our home, the Family Support Center, and that magical pancake castle from his earlier drawing. When the local newspaper wanted to interview him about his artwork, Oliver politely declined. "I don't need to be famous," he told the reporter. "I just like making pictures that make people smile." This morning, as I write this story, I'm listening to Oliver in the kitchen, making pancakes for Sunday brunch. Claire is coming over and he's invited 2 friends from school. He's humming while he works, completely absorbed in getting the batter just right. Toby is sitting hopefully nearby, tail wagging at the possibility of dropped bacon. Through the window, I can see the tree outside our apartment building starting to bloom with spring flowers. As I watch Oliver carefully measure flour into the bowl, I hear him whisper something to Toby that makes me smile. "You know what, boy, truth always wins. It might take a while and it might be scary for a bit, but truth always wins." He's right, of course. Truth did win. But more than that, love won, courage won, the belief that children deserve to be protected and cherished and allowed to grow up without fear, that won too. Our life isn't perfect. I still work night shifts. We still live in our little apartment, and we still can't afford vacations to Europe or private schools. But Oliver knows he's loved beyond measure, and he knows he's safe, and he knows that his voice matters. And really, what more could any child need? As I finish writing this, Oliver calls from the kitchen. "Mom, pancakes are ready, and I made extra just in case anyone else wants to join our family breakfast. Just in case anyone else wants to join our family. That's my son, always ready to make room at our table for one more person who might need a safe place to land." I guess some people are born knowing that love multiplies when you share it, and some people learn it by watching their 8-year-old son stand up in a courtroom and choose truth over fear. Either way, we're the luckiest family in the world, even if we do still occasionally get flour in Toby's fur. What would you have done in Oliver's situation? Have you ever had to choose between protecting someone you love and telling a difficult truth? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. And if this story touched your heart, please subscribe for more real-life stories about courage, family, and the power of standing up for what's right. Thanks for listening.